This is Ken Smith reminding you it happened today, July 17th. But the year was 180 when 6 Christians were executed in northern Africa. This is the earliest record of Christianity in that part of the world. 180. It was this day, 1505. Martin Luther enters into an Augustinian monastery after surviving a lightning strike where he promised that if I survive, I will serve you. 1505. It was on this day, 1850, Harvard Observatory takes the first photograph of a star, Vega. 1850. It was on this day, 1861, that the United States Congress authorizes paper money. 1861. It was on this day, 1867, that the first U.S. dental school is established at Harvard School and Dental Medicine School. 1867. It was on this day, 1897, that the first ship arrives in Seattle carrying gold from the Yukon. 1897. It was on this day, 1918, the Romanov royal family and several of their members are executed by a Bolshevik firing squad in the basement of the Impativ House in Siberia. 1918. It was on this day, 1945, the Potsdam Conference. President Harry Truman, Joseph Stalin, and Winston Churchill hold their first post-World War II meeting, 1945. It was on this day, 1948, that the U.S. Air Force pilot Gail Haverson sees a group of children, almost like refugees, at the airport in Berlin. This is during the Berlin blockade. He came up with an idea, which was called Operation Little Vittles. And they would drop tons of candy on the children waiting below eagerly for a treat. It was on this day, 1954, construction begins of Disneyland. 1954. It was on this day, 1 year later, 1955, Disneyland televises its grand opening in Anaheim, California, 1955. It was on this day, 1966, Jim Ryan sets a mile record. That run was 3 minutes and 51 seconds, 1966. 1 year later, 1967, there are race riots in Cairo, Illinois. It was on this day, 1974, John Lennon of the Beatles is ordered to leave the United States in 60 days. 1974. It was on this day, 1980, that Ronald Reagan formally accepts the Republican nomination for president. 1980. It was on this day, 1995, Forbes magazine announces that Bill Gates is the richest man in the world with a net worth of $12.9 billion. 1995. It was on this day, 2019, just 1 year ago, that Mexican drug cartel head El Chapo is sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years. He was sentenced in New York, 2019. But that was July 17th in the past. This is July 17th, 2020. Of 1,400 Israelis who've been diagnosed with COVID-19 this past month, 47% were infected in schools. Now, over 2,026 students, teachers, and staff have the virus. 28,147 are quarantined in Israel. Governor Andrew Cuomo is upping the ante on New York State's quarantine advisory. He now requires travelers from hotspot states to submit a form with their contact information where they'll spend their 14 days in isolation. Failure to submit that form may result in a $2,000 fine. Violators may also be summoned for a hearing and subject to mandatory quarantine. The rule now applies to travelers from more than 22 states. Cuomo announced the new state health emergency, saying the non-compliance from out-of-state travelers was contributing to the COVID clusters in New York. A federal court ruled this week that women seeking abortion pills during the COVID-19 pandemic should not have to visit a doctor in order to obtain them, but it can be done through the internet. And so there is good news, bad news, confusing news. But behind it all is the good news that this is the day the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. This is Ken Smith reminding you it happened today, July 17th, 2020.